Never know. I might get a message from Steve about today's exercise. All right, digital signals. Maybe we don't do spread spectrum today. I thought it was one of them. Okay, so digital. Oh, well, it could be in digital communication modes. Okay, so digital modes are extremely popular today, like FT8, FT4, JS8 call. There's some people around who don't think it's real amateur radio.
Smart.
It sure is cool, though.
But,
And that's why it's popular, because it's kind of cool. And it's different. It's just higher tech.
Saved my voice.
To me, it's kind of like contest, same as contesting, which I'm not into contesting, but doing FT8 is basically the same thing. You're passing this about the same information. You're doing it in a very short period of time. And you try to get contacts all over
With low power.
with low
Not
power.
even being there.
Right. And you don't have to talk to anybody.
How good is it?
When you're DXing, trying to get countries.
Yeah.
Can't even get in an argument.
When you're contesting,
Oh,
you
you
don't
can't.
talk to anybody.
I don't contest either.
Well, that's why I say it's about the same thing.
Yeah.
You can get an argument. You just go on QRZ and put a comment and start an argument.
Okay.
You don't do it over the air.
Yeah. Well, you can also use JT Alert and bring up the message window and communicate. Sometimes people listen. I've had a few. Morse code is kind of the original digital mode. It's 1 and 0. Depending on how long the one is, determines whether it's a one or a did or a dot or dash. Some of the things that affect the bandwidth of a CW signal is your keying speed. In other words, how many dits or das per second or words per minute, and the shape factor of the waveform. Now, in a very simple one where you're just keying the carrier on and off, you're essentially generating a square wave modulating the carrier. And that's going to produce a lot of harmonics, because we know to generate a square wave, you've got all the odd harmonics in it. So one of the things that, and that will cause what they call key clicks. In a lot of newer radios, they can essentially filter that CW signal. One of the things is, I think they call it a raised sine or raised cosine, where it actually rounds off. In other words, they kind of and the signal with a sine waveform. So instead of being a square wave, it kind of looks like a flat-topped sine wave. So it has much less harmonics on it. The other thing that they do is change the rise and fall times, change the slope of them. They say that for a 13 word per minute transmission, the bandwidth is about 52 hertz. So it's considerably higher if you're able to do 25 or 30 words a minute. Anybody here do 25 words a minute?
I haven't done 25 words a minute in 50,
oh, you did?
In 50 years.
I do during, if I want to make a contact.
I could probably do
on
10
podcast, I do 25.
Wow.
reliable.
I can use 0 reliably.
Do you shape your signal?
Do I shape it?
Change the rise and fall times or any of that, or let the radio do it?
Just push it.
So you don't know what it looks like coming out?
No,
Okay.
I hear it.
Okay. And you don't get complaints about key clicks? Yeah. So what's the approximate bandwidth of a 13 word per minute international Morse code transmission?
The 26, 52.
So that means you need to be a little more than half a herd off of the edge of the band.
Okay. Do you know what they use to gauge the words per minute? They use some standard phrase, right? Some specific words, I think.
I have no idea.
Brendan,
I don't think that's it. Could be.
I think it's a 5-letter word.
It's any five-letter words,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, there is a phrase.
I was thinking there was some kind of standard that they use to measure it. What factors affect the bandwidth of a transmitted CW signal?
Shape.
Right.
Charlie,
Voice.
Yeah.
Voice modulation, key speed, voice.
All right. Digital communication modes. We have frequency shift keying is one of the more popular ones. And obviously the bandwidth increases the higher the data rate, which is one of the reasons why they limit baud rate on some of the bands because of the bandwidth required. And we're limited, what, 300 baud up to something, I forgot.
I never.
But basically HF is limited 300 baud, I think.
That's because HF won't support that.
Right, it's too wide a band, right?
The quality over the HF is
When
can't handle those high speed.
When I was in the service back in the 60s, right? We had multi-channels on one 3K bandwidth, each one doing, I think there was 4 channels doing 75 words per minute in each one.
Wow.
It was made by Collins.
Okay.
They made a special type of encoding and decoding. I have no idea, remember what it was.
Okay, so the bandwidth for frequency shift keying is going to be approximately the frequency shift times 1.2 plus the baud rate. So if you had 170 hertz frequency shift at 300 baud, your bandwidth is going to be about 500 hertz. If you had 4,800 hertz at 9,600 baud, you're up to 15 kilohertz. So it starts to get fairly wide, and you couldn't do 15 kilohertz in the HF band.
Not supposed to.
yeah, they're trying to redo the definition one of these years. Get up with the rest room, just had to define bandwidth. And do whatever you can in between that bandwidth.
If I remember right, I think at 10 meters, it goes up from 300 baud, and then it gradually goes up to, I'm not sure it's limited up in the UHF. So what's the bandwidth of 170 hertz shift, 300 baud, ASCII transmission?
Charlie,
Does it change if it was Baudo?
That's French.
Is it Baudot or Baudo?
And what about ASCII 2? What's the deal with ASCII 2?
Alpha,
We don't do ASCII 2, I don't think.
You kidding? Have you ever heard anybody say ASCII 2?
Oh, yeah. It's actually the proper name. The American Society
Standards of International
Standard Commission for International Interchange or something like that. Um, okay, so I heard an alpha, which was right. So far, we hadn't used a calculator, right?
It's only multiplied by 1.2, right?
Right, so
it's
you can
not-
get close enough using times one. So it seems pretty obvious that signals with a higher data rate are going to require wider bandwidth. You can sometimes increase the symbol rate by using different codes. In other words, by encoding more information in the symbol. Like FT8, for instance, each FT8 symbol represents 3 data bits. And they do that by using 8 different tones of the frequency shift. So it becomes more efficient. You can get more data per symbol. So how may data rate be increased without increasing bandwidth? PSK 31 actually uses phase shift keying as opposed to frequency shift keying. Supposedly it's very popular. I'm going to try it someday. I just haven't had time to get around to it. One of the reasons it's probably one of the narrowest bandwidth. It's even narrower than FT8, which is 50 hertz. And one of the kind of like CW, you can use sinusoidal data pulses, in other words, shaped to reduce the bandwidth requirement to get rid of the harmonics. And the other technique they use is to do sync the phase shifts up so they occur at the zero crossing of the waveform. Oh, yeah. And this is one that's been shaped, where if that was the CW signal, you'd see this sort of square wave. But when you do the raised cosine, and depending on which one of those factors, you get one of these shapes. So that can alter the effective rise time of it and reduce the harmonics. Obviously, the full thing over here gives you which is probably what this waveform is using. Very few harmonics coming out of it. So what technique minimizes the bandwidth of a PSK 31 signal?
Charlie.
Actually, I would think trapezoidal would, but probably not as much. The trapezoidal is similar to what you're doing with the sine wave. Why should phase shifting of a PSK signal be done at the zero crossing of the RF signal?
I think it's alpha.
I think it's alpha too.
Why exactly does that reduce the bandwidth?
Because you're changing the phase when there's essentially no signal at the zero crossing.
So there's
Zero.
no transition.
So you minimize the transition. Not entirely, because depending on how much phase shift at zero, I mean, if that next one is a 1 and the phase shift is 90 degrees, I mean, you're going to go maximal. But overall, it's less transition.
Isn't there a limit on how much phase can change in any one?
Uh,
I think they limit it somehow.
Well, I mean, there's a practical limit in how much you can detect. Just like on the frequency shift.
Yeah, okay, you have to be able to detect something.
Right. I think I know I've seen 8. Um, well, I'm trying to think. What PSK, BPS, QPSK is 4. So that's 16 phases, right? 4 bits. I don't know
I don't.
maybe a 32. I don't know. Okay, so instead of sending single bits, we do symbols where we represent one or more bits. Like I said, FT8, each symbol represents a 3-bit combination. So we talk about symbol rate, but it's the same as baud rate. It's not the same as the bit rate. The bit rate will be much higher can be much higher than the symbol rate because you're sending multiple bits per symbol. So the symbol rate is the rate which the waveform changes. And like I said, baud rate, symbol rate are just 2 different names for the same thing. I guess baud rate came from when we used to do baud, which I guess was prior to ASCII. Because I have a chart somewhere that shows the original baud pattern a long time ago, back in the 1800s. Doggy? Okay.
Charlie.
You were wrong.
Yeah.
Did you not read the question carefully? What is the relationship between symbol rate and baud?
Alpha.
Whenever digital data is sent, it's encoded. A lot of times they use gray code, which was developed to minimize the bit changes in a sequence of patterns. And it helps with error detection as opposed to straight binary code. This chart shows the binary equivalent of these 8 decimal values, the gray code representation, and you can see that whenever there would have been 2 bits change, like from a 1 to a 2, this one's going to a 0, this one's going to 1, so we have to change 2 bits. In the gray code, we only change 1 bit. And
So that's what's used in FT8.
in what?
That's what's used in FT8,
Gray code?
I believe so.
Might be, I'm not sure.
Because that's how they represented in.
I think that that's my grade.
Okay.
No, I'm pretty sure about that.
Well, I do know in FT8, one of the things they do to minimize, they create an array of the
That's what
alpha
they-
characters plus the 10 decimal numerical characters, and then they index into that array, and that number is what they send. The index number of the array is what they send to represent that character. So it's already
And that's-
encoded.
And that's what's being done with FT8 to represent the 8 different levels. Is that gray? It's the gray scripture.
No, it'd be a number from 0 to 35, because there's 36 elements in the array. So that's what you send. Now, whether that gets encoded as binary gray code, I don't know. But the bottom line is gray code changes 1 bit between sequential numbers. Whereas the regular binary code can change as many as 3. So what digital code allows only 1 bit to change between sequential code values?
Delta.
Error correction. Many things can cause errors in a data stream. If you got some interference, you can possibly misinterpret the data. So they came up with techniques to either detect when there was an error or in some cases correct for an error. One of the techniques is they call the ARQ protocol, where if the receiving station detects an error because the parity's wrong or some other checking code doesn't match, or they didn't even get all the message, they can send back an automatic repeat request or an ARQ symbol. The transmitting station will retransmit. And this can go on for several iterations. Usually there's some limit as to how many times it will retransmit. And if it goes beyond that, it usually just drops the connection and you have to kind of start over. That's probably the simplest of the error correction transmission protocols. So how does ARQ accomplish error correction?
Delta.
Actually, I wouldn't really call it error correction. They don't correct. You just keep sending it until you get it right.
Error detection.
Error detection is usually they transmit an additional bit in a group of characters that says something's wrong, and you can correct it by knowing what that bit is supposed to have been.
Yeah.
How it works, I don't know.
Sometimes they call that forward error correction.
Okay,
And you do that by sending extra information. Normally it's some form of a like a Hamming code, which will let you determine which bits are in error and possibly correct some of them. In some cases, you could send the whole data stream more than once. I mean, if you send it 3 times and you just do voting, you pick 2 of the 3, good chance that it's right. They don't do that often.
I don't know.
FTA,
Huh?
it sends it 3 times. It sends it
Sorta.
3 times and votes on it.
So in the case of the forward error correction, you don't need to retransmit because you've already sort of retransmitted by sending additional information. And the disadvantage, of course, is you got to send more data. And it either slows down the overall rate or you got to send it at a higher data rate.
Or increase your bandwidth.
Or increase your bandwidth. So how is forward error correction implemented?
Charlie.
Okay. That was an easy one.
Could have just increased power.
That wouldn't help you with an interfering signal. Surely.
Extremely powerful.
All right. It's like radar burn through.
Yeah,
Okay.